I'm Holly Talley, Manager of Strategic Communications and Media Relations with the BC Coroner Service. This morning you'll be hearing from Dr. Baidwan, BC's Chief Coroner, about the events that occurred on February 10th in Tumbler Ridge. Dr. Baidwan will be available to answer questions from media after his remarks. Anyone joining us by phone who has a question, please press *1 to enter the queue. With that being said, I would like to invite the Chief Coroner to the podium to share his remarks.
Thanks, Holly. Good morning, and thank you for joining us today on the traditional territories of the Lekwungen-speaking peoples, the Esquimalt and the Songhees First Nations. As you all know, February the 10th, 2026, marked a dark day, not just for us in British Columbia, but for all of Canada. 9 people, 6 of them just children, lost their lives in a senseless act of violence in a small town called Tumbler Ridge. A community has been left reeling and families have been devastated by what is now one of the deadliest mass shootings in Canadian history. I recognise the profound loss experienced by those in Tumbler Ridge and the Tumbler Ridge community at large, and my heart goes out to the families of Shanda Aviwana Durand, Zoe Benoit, Takeria Lampert, Abel Mawansa, Ezekiel Schofield, Kylie Smith, Jennifer and Emmett Jacobs. I don't know about you, but my hairs on the back of my neck go up when I say these people's names. It's tragic. I cannot begin to imagine the grief you are experiencing, and I wish you the comfort and peace, all the comfort and peace in the world, what I'm sure will be a long journey towards healing. The tragedy in Tumbler Ridge prompted widespread discussions about mental health, public safety, and how future loss of life may be prevented. I've reflected carefully and deeply on the events in Tumbler Ridge, on what led up to them, what took place, and the impact that followed, and continues to do so. That reflection has underscored for me the unique role that the Coroner's Service plays in examining deaths openly, thoroughly, and in a way that maintains public confidence. In keeping with that role and recognizing the questions and concerns being raised by the community across British Columbia and throughout the country, I have decided to call an inquest, and I'm announcing that decision today. Pursuant to Section 18 of the Coroners Act, I'm directing a coroner's inquest to publicly review the events that led to 9 individuals losing their lives in Tumbler Ridge on February the 10th. An inquest will provide an open, independent forum to examine the circumstances surrounding these 9 deaths, identify any systemic or procedural issues, and make evidence-based recommendations aimed at preventing similar loss of life in the future. A key area of examination will be how individuals in crisis are identified and supported, including access to mental health supports and services in rural and remote and small communities across British Columbia, such as crisis intervention and wraparound supports. This will include consideration of how mental health services and public safety systems work together to support people experiencing complex mental health crises, including broader issues of community awareness, education and support, and matters relating to gender diversity where relevant to the evidence. The inquest will also review emergency response and coordination, including law enforcement and medical response, communication with families and the school community, and opportunities to strengthen preparedness and response in rural settings. Where relevant, the inquest may also consider other systemic factors that emerge through the evidence that we will hear, including how mental health and public safety systems intersect with firearms oversight, and how information is shared between online platforms, emerging technologies like artificial intelligence, and law enforcement. As Chief Coroner, my mandate to promote public safety and the findings and recommendations from this inquest will inform practice and support safety and well-being in communities across British Columbia and Canada. Before I close, I want to take a moment to acknowledge the bravery and the compassion of those people who were there when these tragic events unfolded, as well as those who were among the first to respond to this crisis. From those who acted selflessly in the midst of immediate danger to try and save lives, To those officers and first responders who arrived within moments to face an unforeseen tragedy, your courage has been a light in this moment of darkness, and I thank you. I'd also like to thank the British Columbia Coroner Service members who came together so quickly to coordinate efforts and support each other. I am grateful that I'm allowed to work alongside you. From my conversations with Mayor Krakowka and from what I've seen, I know that Tumbler Ridge is a community that will pull together, hold each other up, and support each other through the long days ahead. Events such as these weigh heavily on all involved. Please check in on your friends and family and ask for help when you need it. Our strength is in our compassion and care for each other. Thank you for being here today. And I'm happy to take questions.
We will now move on to the media Q&A portion by starting with questions in the room. If you have a question, please raise your hand and state your name and public. If you have one question, one follow-up. For media on the phone lines, please press 1 to enter the queue.
Thank you for doing this. Would it be standard practice for your office to hold this inquest in Tumbler Ridge?
There is no standard practice to hold inquests in any particular place, but I think it behooves us to hold the inquest where it will do the most good. And I'm talking to various people, including the Premier's office, including the Mayor of Tumbler Ridge, to work out exactly where it will be held. And at present, I do not know where it will be held.
Will your ability to do your work be constrained in any way by police investigation? And will you be able to look into the question of the weapons that were used here and how they were obtained?
Absolutely. As to the second part of what you said, absolutely. We will look at the weapons and how they were obtained, and all that will come out of the inquest. We always use the findings of a police investigation in our coroner's inquest. We tend to conclude our investigation after a police investigation has concluded for that reason. And so we work hand in glove, extracting what we can from what they've gleaned. And we'll do so.
Oh, hi. It's Rob Buffin with CTV News. I wanted to get your reaction. The BC Conservatives have said, and I expect they will continue to say, that they would like to see a public inquest rather than a coroner's inquest or a public inquiry, because they view that that would provide more information. What's your response to that?
My response is simple. I'm the Chief Coroner of BC. We will provide what we can through an inquest. It's going to be an independent process. It's a very broad spectrum of stuff that we can look at. The terms of reference are really as wide as you want them to be. The circumstances of death we will explore of each one of these deaths, and that's the only thing that confines us, really. So if anything is pertinent to the circumstances of death, it doesn't matter what the temporal association was. It could be years before. We can explore it, and we will. So I don't think we will be missing anything that would need a public inquiry thereafter. But I'm not the person that decides on a public inquiry. That's the Premier's office, and if you've got questions about that, you're welcome to ask them.
By way of follow-up, you talked about looking at things in a temporal way that could have predated this tragedy, and one of the things the Premier said last week was that whatever mechanisms used to get more information, as I recall, he'd said that the public will know about the exchanges on ChatGPT involving the shooter. Is that something that you can pledge for people who want to know what the specifics of what we're being engaged in AI? Will the public know that transcript?
I'm not in the business of pledging what will happen at the inquest, because that will happen at the inquest. What I will tell you is anything that occurs in the inquest is open to the public. And so evidence such as that will be played out, and we will investigate in a fulsome fashion. So all of that sort of stuff will be there. I'm not there for sound bites. We are there as a public institution, and our mandate is to do exactly this kind of work. And we do it well, and we will do so in this case.
Hey there, Emily Fagan, CBC. I'm wondering, what is the timeline that you see this inquest happening on? Like, when can we expect it would start, and how long might it last?
Good questions, and sadly I don't know when it will start. It's dependent on things like the conclusion of a police investigation. It's depending on things like in our own investigative phase ending. And so I don't know where our investigative phase will take us. It's ongoing at present, and it will take as long as it takes. What I can assure you, though, is There is a long list of inquests waiting to happen. We've got somewhat of a backlog, but this will not go into the backlog. This will be, as soon as it is available, all the information is available to hold an inquest, we will hold an inquest. And I promised that to the mayor of Tumbler Ridge as well when I spoke to him earlier this week. As to how long the inquest lasts, that really depends on the complexity of the issues that are being dealt with, and I cannot think of a more complex set of issues than these. So I expect it will last longer than our usual 1 to 2 weeks, but I don't know how long it will last in total.
And I'm wondering as well, we've talked about the mental health aspect, the
Yep.
guns, AI. Are there any other big questions for you or that you've been hearing that you hope will be answered in this inquest? And, what overall what impact do you hope this inquest has, for the people affected?
Again, I'm not going to fudge my answer. I'm going to be honest with you and tell you that I'm not going to tell you what the inquest is going to talk about. But everything that everyone is out there speaking about in the media at the moment, and all the things that are concerning people, will be represented in the inquest, because that's what's obvious, and it will be talked about. And it's all about following the evidence that we gather. We deal in facts, and we will have experts there to discuss the facts and explain them to jury. One of the things that an inquest does that nothing else, no other forum can do, is put people that are British Columbians, who are not experts, who are lay people, as members of a jury in charge of, coming up with a verdict and coming up with recommendations. Our job, and the job of my senior inquest counsel, Rolf Warburton, is to make sure that the information, the facts that we've gleaned during our investigative phase are actually portrayed to that jury. The jury then assimilate those facts and come up with recommendations. And as a part of that, they will listen to, experts that get brought along. There will be participants there. I expect, like any other instance, there will be participants from police services. There will be participants from unions that represent various groups, including participants of the families sometimes seek participant status too. So all of these individuals will get their say, and the jury listens to all of that. No other forum gives that level of openness and public accessibility. So that's the real benefit of an inquest.
Thank you.
Hi, Emily Jobeski with Vista News. You were just talking about the jury a bit. Can you tell me a little bit more about how that jury is selected?
So the jury is selected in the same way that any other jury in BC would be selected. So the Sheriff's Department is responsible for doing that, and we do not select the jury. It's exactly the same as any other court proceeding, any other justice system proceeding where a jury is needed.
And I was also wondering, we've talked a bit about mental health. What kind of, processes are in place to ensure that survivors and victims aren't being, re-traumatized throughout this process of the coroner's inquest?
It's a really wonderful question. We always try and make sure that when we have these conversations with families, that's the part of our job. It's not just when we do an inquest. Every day when someone dies, we want to make sure that the families aren't traumatized. We want to make sure that we're not causing more harm. So coroners are actually well versed at doing this work, and will do it in the same sort of elegant fashion that they employ every other day. What we will get in this instance, though, I think, and I don't know what the mechanism will look like, but there will be support available for those that are participating, and for families that will ensure that that actually happens.
Yeah, hi, good afternoon, Wolf Deppner, good morning, Wolf Deppner, Canadian Press. At the beginning of your presentation, you talked about investigating matters related to gender diversity. Can you sort of expand on that? What exactly did you mean by that? And can you sort of give us a rundown of what we might be expecting there? Thank you.
So I'm afraid I can't do that because that's dependent upon the facts that we gleaned during our investigation. I merely said that because that is something that people are concerned about at the moment. So we will employ all the skills that we have to investigate the circumstances of what happened. And if gender diversity was an issue and comes up as an issue in those circumstances, then it will be examined in a fulsome fashion.
Thank you for that answer. And just as a follow-up, obviously we've had a lot of discussion around OpenAI and what knowledge that company had, what they could have done to prevent this or might have done to prevent this. What, if any, powers does your inquest have when it comes to, for example, securing documents, proprietary documents, documents that companies in the past have said, or private documents that have commercial value and so on. Can you talk about that aspect as well? Thank you.
Yeah, again, a good question, very astute question. I don't consider it to be about powers. I consider it to be about sort of asking for information and having the conversation about why you need it. And what I do know is that when we ask for information from companies, especially large companies that sort of, it behooves them to be cooperating, they will cooperate. If you're talking about sort of, powers to seize, we have orders to seize that we can use within British Columbia, but we can't use them in other parts of Canada, and we can't use them in other countries. So it's not more. To me, it's not simply about power. It's more about sort of allowing people to share information and encouraging people to share information. When you start talking about power, there's limitations everywhere. Even the federal government would have limitations around what it could gather and what it could get from a company that's registered in a different country.
Are there any more questions in the room? Okay, thank you. Let's move to the phones. Please remember you are limited to one question and one follow-up. And please take yourself off speaker when you are asking the questions. First up, we're going with Jesse Winter from the Globe and Mail.
Yes, hi, thanks very much. Just one clarification. You discussed, in response to a question about timing, I think you said that the inquest would have to take place or would have to begin at the conclusion or after the conclusion of the police investigation. Is that correct?
Really, I guess, to clarify that, the investigation that we hold in the coroner service concludes in the inquest. We usually wait until we've got as much information as we can from any other ancillary investigations that are occurring, especially the police investigation. In this instance, it may not be that important to wait for that, but it depends. I don't know where the police investigation is going at present, and it rather depends on where they take their investigation.
Thanks very much. That's everything.
Do you have a follow-up question? Okay, we will move to Les Lean from Victoria Times.
Oh, thanks, Dr. Baidwan. Have you issued any preservation orders or taken any steps in your official capacity to handle or preserve evidence since February 10th?
I'm afraid I'm not going to get into the investigation that is ongoing at present.
And are you going to personally preside over this inquest? And I'm just wondering about if you could refresh my memory on the powers of a jury. Are there any constraints on their recommendations, or is there anything that would give added force or weight to recommendations?
As to your first question, I don't know who's going to be presiding over this inquest, but it'll be the person that's most appropriate to do so. And if that's me, then it will be me. If it's someone else, it will be someone else. We've got a bunch of capable people that could preside. As to the second part, jury gets all the information played out in front of it. They get to ask questions, and they make recommendations, and the recommendations that they make are non-fault finding. That's the most important thing for us. We are not a fault-finding process, which is a distinction from the justice system. We're an inquest where we sort of try to get to the truth about things and try to see whether we can improve and change what happened so it never happens again.
Thanks.
Thank you. Next, we'll move on to Paul Vieira from the Wall Street Journal.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Do you anticipate that this inquest will call from witnesses from OpenAI to discuss safety protocols and why the material, the interactions between the suspect and their chatbot wasn't disclosed to law enforcement officials?
This investigation and the investigative phase is ongoing. We're actually investigating everything that happened in the circumstances of the death. during that investigation, we will glean exactly what happened in all sorts of ways. And we will be able to go back in time and look to see what shaped the individual, the perpetrator, in becoming the person that they were before they did what they did. So I'm answering it in a roundabout fashion because I'm not going to get into details about what will be brought up at the inquest or not. But if it's pertinent to our investigation, and this will be, then I can imagine it will be at the inquest.
Okay. I think I'm going to leave it there. I'll let someone else on the line.
Thank you.
That concludes today's event. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.